these workshops. So tonight I'm going to concentrate the workshop on rising seniors, but at the end, if you are a sophomore, junior, 11th, 9th, 10th, or 11th grader, we can also talk about strategies you guys can be working on over the summer as well. But my goal is for you to walk away with one item, one aha moment, one thing that you can start to do over the summer and implement to either build your resume or just make your life so much easier. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Got a little PowerPoint, and then we'll take some questions at the end. And hopefully, again, you guys will learn something. So let me jump into it, and we'll go from there. Yeah, if we have some extra time, I had a little video here to show you about some of my students who graduated last year. And so we might come back to that. But I want to go ahead and jump into the workshop itself. So give me 1 second here, and we'll click the button. Hopefully everyone can see it. So can you guys give me a thumbs up if you guys can see my screen? Excellent. Okay. Got the screen going on. So we are going to talk about, what should we be doing over the summer, and why should we make it count? So we're going to talk a little bit about the Common App and what we can be doing. Whoops, here we go. So college admissions isn't just about who is the smartest, right? It's about who is the most strategic. And that, again, starts tonight. And if you really want to, again, reduce the stress of this college planning process, time is on your side, meaning you want to take advantage of the free time you have over the summer to do as much work as possible. And before I get into this, I thought I'd show you some trends that we are seeing in the college planning industry. Of course, the price of college is crazy, right? Some private colleges and university recently announced $90K plus annual tuition. And I was looking today, these numbers are over 100 this year in 2025. It is crazy what the cost of attendance is. The sticker price, that's not necessarily what you pay, but still, that's a lot of money for some of these colleges and universities. And of course, families are facing a record amount of student loan debt because of the price of college. It's estimated that over 100 billion of new loans will be issued in 2024, 2025, and that's up from 98 billion in 2023. So it just keeps going up, and it keeps getting worse. And so, one of the reasons I love doing this is helping my students and parents get into a great college for a wonderful price. And we're going to talk about some of those strategies in a minute. I teach my students and my parents how to use their heart and their calculator to make a good college decision. We want a good return on our investment, right? And this was kind of surprising too. More than half of college grads get jobs after graduation, and they don't use their degrees. To me, that is that is mind-blowing, right? If you're going to spend 4 years of college, you're going to spend all this money. You want to make sure you have a job waiting for you, a good paying job. That's why you're going to college, not just to get a degree. Of course, there's some merit for just getting a degree, but if you're putting 4 years of work, energy, time, and you're spending all this money, hey, let's get a return on our investment. That's what college is. It's an investment, just like buying land, just like buying stocks. We want to, at the end of 4 years, we want to be making more money, right? So we want to think about college as an investment. So let's jump back to our topic today. Why summer before senior year matters. A lot of students wait until the beginning of senior year to really start their application season, right? They think, I'm going to just take summer off. I'm going to relax a little bit. And then when school starts in the fall, I'm going to work on my application. That's what I did when I went to high school. That's what lots of students still do today. And to me, that's a huge mistake, because you are going to limit your options doing that typically. Summer should be your secret weapon. This should be the time where you get ahead of everyone else. This is the time when you can use time to your advantage. We know the deadlines, right? If you're applying to an early action college, for example, and we know the deadline is October 15th, why wait, right? The longer you wait, the deadline dates don't change, right? So as the time gets closer and closer, the pressure gets more and more. So we want to spread this out over a longer period of time. We know the deadline date, so use it to your advantage. And so over the summer, lots of students have a little bit more free time than they do during school, right? So when school rolls around and you're taking your hard classes and you might be involved in extracurricular activities or you might be working, you don't have as much time to spend on these college applications. And you typically have a little bit more time over the summer. So we got to take advantage of it. 83% of seniors who start in the summer reduce application stress. And so again, that's what we're talking about. We want to reduce the stress of this college planning process. Let's talk about and think about who is reading our applications and why we want to start this process early. Well, applications are read really fast. If you had to guess, you can put this in the chat. How many minutes do you think, on average, a college admissions officer reviews your application? Is it 20 minutes? Is it 2 minutes? Is it somewhere in between? What do you guys think? Just put it in the chat. I'm curious. Any guesses? So Ellen said 2 to 4. Good guess. Anyone else? 5 minutes? Maria? Okay. Min said 5 minutes. Yeah, 10 to 15. Yeah, you guys are right on. So on average, it's around 8 minutes. A little bit, 8 to 10 minutes, 8 to 12 minutes, depending upon the school. Your more prestigious private schools spend a little bit more time on it. Your larger state schools spend less time on it just because of the numbers that they got to go through. But bottom line, they're reading through your application as fast as they can, and they are pausing. And they're reading and they're pausing. So applications are read really fast. So first impressions matter. So if that's the case, we want to put our best foot forward. So we want to take our time with our application to make the best impression. Makes sense, right? I mean, that's pretty obvious. And to do that, what we need to do is we need to story tell all parts of our application. We need to have a theme throughout our application. So many students think that each part of the application is a separate piece. Like, the resume or your activities list is one piece, and then your grades is one piece, and then maybe your transcript is another piece, and your standardized test scores and your essay. No, they should all have a theme, a connected theme throughout your application. And that is strategic storytelling. And that is what kind of separates you and makes you stand out from your competition. But in order to do that, you need to have time. You need to not rush through this, okay? So let's look and talk a little bit about the Common Application. And the reason why I'm talking about the Common Application tonight and not the Coalition application or college-specific application is because the Common Application is one application you can use to apply to approximately 1,000 colleges and universities in the United States. And so it's what most students typically use to apply to college. Now, of course, if you live in California or Texas, of course, you can use one of the state applications as well. But again, most students are going to use the Common Application. So we're going to start with the activities list. How many of you have heard of the activities list and know what I'm talking about? Just let me know. Just kind of put a yes in the chat that you've heard of it or you've never heard of it. And the reason why I want to know that is I want to kind of, if you never heard of the application or the activities list, I'll talk about that a little bit. But if you have, then I won't waste your time. Okay, so we have a few students that haven't heard about the activities list. So let's describe what this is. So on the Common Application, there is a section called the activities list. And essentially what you do is you take your resume, so what you've done over the course of the last 4 years, and you put it on the Common Application. And you have 10 slots to put your different activities on there. Do you need to fill up all 10? No. If you have more than 10, what happens where you can only put your top 10? Okay. And you are limited on how many characters that you can write. And so you got to be very strategic on the words that you use when you're filling out your activities list, because you only have 150 characters, I think it is. So if you have 150 characters, not words, 150 characters to describe an activity that you might have been involved in for the last 10 years, and you're trying to make a great impression, you really have to think about the word choice. Does that make sense, everyone? Yes? Okay. So again, this list, your activities list, your resume, for lack of a better term, you want to make sure your most impressive activities are at the top because they read top down. So they're reading your activity number 1 to activity number 10. And as I mentioned before, they're going quick through this application, right? And so if you don't grab their attention by 1 or 2, they might not make it to activity number 8 on your list. Does that make sense, everyone? Yes? Okay. So you always want to lead with your most impressive activity. Okay. And we can talk a little bit more about how to write your activity if we have time today, your activities list. But you want to focus on impact. And I like to think about, how did you make a difference, right? And you want to make sure you stress leadership. And by the way, that doesn't mean you have to have been elected captain of the football team or be the president of a particular club to show leadership. You can show leadership in lots of different areas. You don't have to be an elected or chosen to show leadership. A lot of times, just because you are a upperclassman, you have leadership. You can show leadership just by doing what's right. Okay. So there's lots of ways to describe leadership, but colleges like to see leadership. So make sure you focus on impact and leadership. And when you're describing your activities list, you want to use strong active verbs. You don't need to say, I did so-and-so. You start with the verb. Led this. You see what I mean? Does that make sense, everyone? Anyone follow me? Okay. Be aware of your tenses. So what do I mean by that? So a lot of students kind of get a little mixed up on the tenses. Should I use past tense? Should I use, current tense, present tense, excuse me? So a good rule of thumb is if you are still involved, meaning that you're going to be in this activity in 12th grade, and maybe you did it last year, you did it the year before, you want to use present tense. However, if you did an activity, let's say your sophomore year, and you're not doing it anymore, you want to use past tense. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. And quantify when possible, meaning use numbers whenever you can, if it makes the description more impactful for you, right? So let me give you an example. Let's say that you were in the Spanish club and you helped collect money for some families in Lima, Peru, right? And so one student in the class wrote on their Common App activities list, volunteered and helped raise money for needy families in South America. That's okay. That's perfectly fine. But that's not that impressive when you read it. If you can rearrange that sentence and use quantitative numbers, boy, that's going to jump off the page. So let's use that example. Let's say we said, led a group of 20 students where we raised over $4,000 to help needy families in Lima, Peru that were, their homes were flooded or something like that. And hopefully that makes sense, where the second one sounded in red a lot more impressive because of the quantitative numbers. Does that make sense, everyone? Just kind of raise your hand if that makes sense. Yeah. So as you can see, when I do these workshops, I like to do a lot of interaction. I'll usually talk to my students and parents when I'm doing these workshops. So I love to get that interaction from you guys. So, and the reason why I do that, because if it doesn't make sense, I can explain it a different way. So you'll hear me ask you questions throughout this process. All right, so that is the activities list. Now let's go on to the essay or the personal statement. We could, again, spend an hour just on this. Of course, we don't have time to go over in detail each one of these ideas, but these are all things that you should make note of and think about as you're starting your personal statement. Well, the first thing, and this makes sense, and this is what I'm doing with my seniors right now, we are starting the Common App personal statement. We are writing the statement right now. Actually, next week, their first draft is due. And so we are going through the process of brainstorming their ideas and starting to create their outlines to help them write their first draft. Do not wait. And the reason I say that, on average, it takes students about 10 hours of total time between, all drafts, between reviewing and writing their essays and coming up with ideas and creating an outline and going through the different revisions, it's probably 10 hours on average. And so if you think about that, it's not a lot of time, but if you try to do this in between, your AP classes and going to clubs and working when school starts, boy, it's a lot of work in between all your other homework. So that's one of the big things, is start your essay over the summer. You will thank yourself for it. Every one of my seniors, when they graduate, I always ask them, if you could do something different, what would you do? And they all tell me, every one of them, they'll say, start my essay earlier because it took so long. And when you're writing these essays, you want to, avoid some of the cliches if you can. Again, that doesn't mean you can't write about these topics, because I've seen students write about these topics and the essays were fantastic. So there's really no topic that you can't write about. But if you do decide to write about one of these cliched topics or topics that colleges see over and over and over again, it's got to be fantastic. It's got to be excellent. It's got to be top of the line, because they see so many of these, right? They read so many of these. And again, they're scamming, they're reading through these essays really, really quick, because they got to get through a stack of essays every day. So sports injuries, right? Overcoming sports injuries, or going on a summer mission trip, things like that. Students ask me all the time, well, are there any topics that I should avoid? Well, not necessarily, but I will give you some recommendations, what I've seen over the years. If you're not just a naturally funny person, don't try to be funny on the Common App personal statement, because sometimes it comes across as, well, it just doesn't come across as funny. And sometimes it can be the exact opposite, right? It's almost like sometimes when you read an email or a text, you can interpret it a number of different ways and go, all right, should I be mad at this text? Am I reading this right? Or are they just kind of, playing with me here? Same thing with these essays when it comes to humor. You kind of need to be cautious with that. Second thing, again, I don't want to change your mind, but you want to be careful with topics around religion and topics around, talking about policies and just, what am I trying to say here? What's the word I'm looking for? Politics. Yeah, just politics in general, right? And why do I say that? Because you never know about the person reading it. You don't ever know their politics. You don't know their background. You don't know, do they lean to the left? Do they lean to the right? And the same thing with religion, right? You might want to avoid that. Again, I'm not saying you shouldn't if that's something you're really, really interested in and you want to talk about it, but just know that there's a risk associated with it. Okay, so let's jump on to the next items when it comes to your personal statement. I want you to remember, who are you writing to? So let's do this in the chat. Really quickly. Who in the world are we writing to? Are you writing to your mom and dad? Are you writing to the college? Well, who at the college are you writing to? You're writing to your English teacher? Who do you think we're writing to? Students, parents? Let me know. Just take a second here and type it into the chat. Gina said admissions. Okay, good. Anyone else? College interns. Yeah, that's a good question. You go to project yourselves. Okay, university staff. Yeah, you kind of all are kind of getting the idea. So let me give you an example of what I'm talking about here. So let's say that you went on vacation, right? You went on this great vacation. You had a great time, and you wanted to make sure you get to go next year, right? And you want your friend to go next year. So you write a letter or an email to your mom and dad and thanking them for letting you go on this trip, this vacation. And then you write another letter or email to your best friend and telling them how amazing it was and how cool it was, and they should come with you next year. And then the third email or letter you're going to write to a college talking about what you did during this trip. Now, if you think of those different audiences, how you write those letters or how you write those emails, the wording that you use is going to be completely different, right? Writing to your parents versus writing to your best friend versus writing to a college is going to be different. So you always have to remember in the back of your mind, you're writing to the college admissions officer. Again, these are young men and women. I say young because most of them are, in 20s to 40s, and that's young to me. And so these young men and women are reading a stack of applications every day from 9 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock at night, right? And they're going through hundreds of these over a course of a month, and maybe 1,000, just depending on how quickly they get through their stack of applications they get through. And so you have to remember who you're writing to. You got to grab their attention right off the bat, because if you don't, they're going to, let's move on to the next one. So you are writing to the college admissions officer, not the professor, not a college counselor, not your high school English teacher, not your mom and dad. Okay. All right. Why in the world are you writing this essay? And what's the point of doing this essay? Students ask me all the time, what in the world, why do colleges want me to write this essay? Well, essentially, you have to think from the college's point of view. They don't know who you are necessarily. They don't see a picture of you. There's no video of you. They've never met you before, typically. All they have is this, piece of paper in front of them, right? Or on the computer screen, it says, okay, this is your name, and this is all the data that we have. We have class rank, we have GPA, we might have standardized test scores, we have the classes that you took, right? We might have some letters of recommendation about who you are, but it really doesn't tell them, what goes on in your mind, how you think, who you are as a person. And that's why colleges want you to write this essay. And they want you to prove that you will be a good student at their college or university. That's why you're writing this essay, to prove that you have those positive characteristics that the colleges are looking for. And you do this through a story. You are writing a story about yourself, and you're trying to showcase a positive or positives, more than one characteristic that the colleges are looking for. And you do this through a story. And so this brings us to our theme. So what I want you guys to remember, and I say guys, I mean ladies and gentlemen, what I want you to remember is, to determine your theme, you want to think of these two questions. What happened? Meaning, tell me your story. You're writing the story. So what happened? And why does it matter? Meaning, what are the characteristics that you are showcasing? Positive characteristics. So what do I mean by that? Well, I don't know. Let's come up with one. Let's say that I want to talk about how I overcame something, right? Maybe it was my fear of public speaking. And so I joined the speech and debate team my sophomore year. And I had this really, really bad feeling getting in front of people. And so I can talk about my journey in my essay. That is my story of how I overcame this feeling, and what I did to do it, and how I became a better person, and what I learned from it, and how I'm going to take this to college and beyond. Does that make sense, everyone? Okay. So again, remember what happened. Why does it matter? That is your theme, and that colleges want to know what your theme is right off the bat. And so that should probably be in your first paragraph. And again, you want to grab their attention. I want you to think of like one of your favorite movies. Think of an action movie that you've seen recently on Netflix or, at the movie theater. You could watch an action movie. Typically in the first minute, you are in the action, right? It draws you in. And you kind of know how the movie's going to end, right? If you're watching a love story, maybe you kind of get who the main characters are, and kind of these two characters are probably going to fall in love. But over the course of these 2 hours, hour and a half in the movie theater, you want to know how they meet. You want to know what they had to overcome, right? Same thing with your essay. You want to grab their attention. You want to tell them what your theme is, and you want to explain that journey. Does that make sense, everyone? Okay. All right. So now let's talk about the additional information. There is a section on the Common App, in addition to your Common App personal statement, where you can write some additional information that allows the colleges to get a better feel of who you are, or something happened. They want to know a little bit more about it. So for example, let's say that you submitted your transcript and you got all A's and B's except for one class your sophomore year, you got a D. And you might want to try to explain why you got this D, right? Because that is something that just kind of stands out to colleges. They're going to look at this and go, why in the world did this student who has A's and B's get this D? Because there's nowhere else on your application where you can put this. It's not in your transcript, right? There's no other place that you can explain this. I'll give you another example. I had a student of mine who, him and his best friend were in a cafeteria, and they went to a private school. And freshman year, they were horsing around, playing in the cafeteria, and things got a little bit physical. And they got taken to the principal's office, and the principal said, "Hey, guys, I got to suspend you because in our school, if you do any of this horsing around, it's an automatic suspension." And it went on his personal file. And this guy was an all A student, just great kid all around. And so he had to explain why he was suspended on his personal file, because if he didn't, that would have been a red flag. And so, you have to kind of say, make it brief, but you also have to explain the unusual circumstance. But most importantly, you have to take responsibility. You can't blame someone else. You can't blame the best friend for pushing you. You can't blame the teacher for giving you a D. You don't blame others. What you want to do is just explain the situation, show maturity, show that you've learned from this, you've grown from this, and became a better person because of it, or something like that. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense, guys. All right. Now let's talk about financial fit. And again, we could spend hours on this, and this is one of the things I really work with my students on, because when we're narrowing down your college list, we want to look for colleges that are a good fit socially, a good fit academically, but also a good fit financially, right? So let's talk about some of the nuances and maybe some of the wording you're going to hear, and some of the definitions as well. The first one I want to mention is called Student Aid Index. Student Aid Index, or SAI. What is that? Well, you've probably heard of the FAFSA form, or the free application for federal student aid. And you probably heard that 2 years ago, there was a big change in the FAFSA form, right? And 2 years ago, students and parents were having a tough time filling out this new form. It came online really late. Well, one of the big changes was the new FAFSA form, how it's calculated, and what it actually calculates. So the number, and by the way, what is the free application for federal student aid? It is a form that students who want to try to qualify for federal need-based aid and sometimes merit-based aid, you have to fill this form out. And parents and students can fill it out starting in October of their senior year. So seniors, it would be this October. But getting back to the student aid index, when you fill out the FAFSA form, when you put in your financial information, when you put in your mom and dad's financial information, their assets, their savings, how much money they make, you as a student, you put in how much money you make, how much money you've saved, and it'll calculate the student aid index. What is the student aid index? It basically is trying to tell you how much the federal government, and sometimes the colleges, thinks you can afford to pay on a yearly basis, not over 4 years, per year. So the student aid index is basically the number the colleges use to determine how much you can pay. And they put this number into a financial aid form, or financial aid formula, to determine if you qualify for need-based aid. And some colleges use this also to help them determine if you qualify for merit-based aid. Okay. So not to get too into the weeds, the lower your student aid index, the typically more need-based aid you're going to receive, and vice versa. If your student aid index number is really, really high, that means you're probably going to not qualify for a lot of need-based aid, not merit-based aid. And merit-based aid is based upon not income, not assets, but it's based upon the talent of the student. So that's like GPA, standardized test scores, a basketball scholarship. That's all merit-based aid. Okay. So that brings me to the middle column, the different types of aid. We just talked about need-based aid. Need-based aid, again, is based upon income and assets. It's based upon a formula. Then we have merit-based aid. And merit-based aid is based upon academics and leadership and talent. Again, it's not necessarily based upon income. So if we have a high income family, And some families think, you know what, I'm just not going to get any aid. Well, you can still get merit aid. You might not get need-based aid, or vice versa. And then we have outside scholarships. And this is like the Coca-Cola scholarship or the Taco Bell scholarship or your local Kiwanis Club, right? These are private scholarships from foundations, from nonprofit organizations, things like that. And you want to try to maximize each one of these. You want to find out which one you qualify for, and you want to maximize it, right? And that's how we save on average $40,000 to $60,000 in college costs per family, because we determine which these, which one of these you and your family qualify for, and we show you which colleges will give you the money. Okay. And I want you to remember this: not every college has the same type of financial aid. They don't give out the same type of financial aid. Every college is different. Some colleges will give out a lot of need-based aid and give out no merit-based aid. And some colleges give out a lot of merit-based aid and very little need-based aid. So you have to understand this before you apply to these colleges, because a lot of students, they just apply, and parents, they'll just apply and just hope for the best. And like, all right, I hope I get something. That is not what you want to do, right? You're just leaving it up to the college and hope for the best. Now, you want to be very strategic about this and pinpoint the colleges you want to apply to that you know will probably give you money. That's how you reduce the cost of college, okay? So again, these are the different forms of financial aid. As I mentioned before, we have our outside scholarships or private scholarships, and these are the ones that most students are familiar with, right? You can go online and just type in scholarships on Google, and you're going to see a million of these things, and it gets a little overwhelming. But what I tell my students, if you add up all of the private scholarships that are out there, let me go back. If you add up all of the private scholarships that are out there, and then you add up all of this other money between need, merit, the college's own money, federal money, state money, this only represents about 2 to 3% of all of this other money. So I'm not saying you shouldn't apply for outside scholarships, but you absolutely should go after the college's own money and merit-based money and need-based money, because there's more of it, and your chances of getting it are much better, right? So apply for the need-based aid, merit-based aid, college's own money, and then go after the private scholarships. So how do you find the schools that will give you generous aid? Well, you need to know 3 things, right? First, your academics. What is your GPA? What is your class rank if your high school does that? What is your standardized test scores potentially? You also need to know what your family's financials are, and that's where that SAI calculation comes in. Do we have a high SAI, or do we have a very low SAI? Am I going to qualify for need-based aid, or am I not going to qualify for need-based aid? Or maybe I'm middle income, where I might qualify for some need-based aid and for some merit. And once you know that, then you can look at the policies, the financial aid policies of each school that you're thinking about applying to. And that might help you either eliminate some schools or open up other colleges you thought were just too expensive, but based upon their policy, and the financial aid that they give out, they might give you money to come to school there, and it might be less than it would cost to go to your local state school. Okay. So here's some examples of what I mean by this. So the colleges on the left, they are very generous in giving out merit-based aid, meaning non-need-based aid. So if you're a high income earner, or if you're a middle income family, or you think mom and dad makes a lot of money, they have lots of assets, you can look for colleges that give out a lot of merit-based aid. And vice versa, if you're a family that, your SAI is pretty low and you qualify for a lot of need-based aid, well, there are colleges out there that will give you 100% of any need, meaning that if you need 50, they're going to give you 50, right? There are colleges that do that, but you got to know that ahead of time so you can pinpoint which colleges to apply to. Okay. So again, this is kind of what we do with our students. So kind of going back, so you can probably hear my dog barking, so I apologize for that. But probably going back to kind of what we should be doing, these are kind of the biggest 4 things we should be doing over the course of summer. Number 1, finalizing your college list. Now, I put 8 to 12 schools here. Let me go back. Put in the comments if you think that's too many schools to apply to. What do you think? Too many? Not enough? What do you think? Any guesses? No guesses? Write them out. Colby, I like your answer. I probably should have asked this question before I showed everyone the slide, right? Well, there is a method to my madness. So again, thanks, Colby, for answering my question here. What we want to try to do is create competition between these schools in these colleges and universities. And if you only apply to 3 or 4 schools and you get into 2 of them, the colleges will know they have a 50-50 chance, right? There's no incentive for them to try to sweeten the pot, if you will, to give you more money. So you want to create competition between these colleges. And you do that by applying to a number of different schools. Okay. All right. Next thing you want to do is, of course, as we mentioned before, is draft your personal statement. And of course, you want to visit. There's no substitute for a college visit, right? And if you can't visit these colleges in person, then do a virtual visit. Actually, I would suggest everyone do a virtual visit before they do an actual physical visit where you walk around on campus. I'll give you a great example of this. My daughter, she is a rising senior as well. And we were going through this process, helping her narrow down her colleges a few months ago. And she told me kind of what she was looking for. So I kind of said, hey, look at this college. I think you're going to like this. It kind of has what you're looking for. And I had her do a virtual tour. And I was already planning on, taking her and visiting to the school. Now, it was about a 3.5-hour drive. So it wasn't that far, but it still was a 3.5-hour drive there and a 3.5-hour drive back. So, it was an investment, right? I mean, it was something I'm going to have to take a day off of work for. And so, she went and watched it. She came back and she said, nope, I don't want to do it. I don't want to go. And I'm like, what do you mean? It has everything you're looking for. She's like, I just don't like the look of the campus. I just don't like the look of the campus. And so it was good because I didn't waste my time. I didn't waste my resources. I didn't waste my money. So always do a virtual visit ahead of time, especially for colleges that are far away or a few hours away. And if you don't like the college, then obviously don't go visit the school. So some advice, if you will. Also understand the difference between early action and early decision. Now, they sound very similar. And a lot of students and parents kind of get these 2 definitions. They don't understand the differences. So I'm going to go over them really, really quick for you. So early action and early decision have some similarities. It means that you can apply to a college early, usually October, November, early November timeline, depending upon the school. And the college says, hey, if you apply early decision or early action, we are going to review your application really early. So they'll typically review it December timeframe, November, December timeframe. And they will let you know an exact date that they're going to let you know by. So it might be like January 15th or before. So let's just pick UNC Chapel Hill. UNC Chapel Hill has an October 15th deadline date for early action. And they might say, hey, we will let you know by January 15th if you've been accepted, denied, or waitlisted. And what's the advantage of that? Well, number one, you get to know pretty early if you've been accepted or denied or waitlisted, right? If you've been denied, you can apply to other schools. You still have time to apply to other schools. If you've been accepted, you have a lot more time to kind of plan, maybe do a college visit if you want to do that, right? And if you've been waitlisted, it gives you an opportunity to also to send the college, if they will allow you to send supporting documents to get off the wait list. Okay. The difference between early action and early decision is early action, you can apply to as many colleges as you want to. Early action, you can get into as many colleges as you want to. There is no obligation to attend any of those schools as early action. However, early decision, you can only apply to one college for early decision. Why? Because you're basically saying, if you accept me, I'm obligated to go to your school. So if I apply to, I don't know, let's say Georgetown, and I click on early decision, and Georgetown says, Ryan, welcome aboard. We'd love to have you. You're going to be a freshman next year. I'm really, really excited. So now I have to tell all of these other colleges that I applied to that I'm going to Georgetown, right? What's the advantage of early decision? Well, it's the same kind of advantages as early action. However, it almost gives you a boost. Your chances go up of getting into these colleges because the colleges know that you're coming, right? If they accept you, you're coming. You can't go anywhere else. What's the downside of this? Does anyone know what the downside of early decision is? Any guesses? Well, the downside of early decision is we don't know what is the cost to go. And from my perspective, we tend not to see the financial aid award letters be as big for students that do early decision because there's really not a huge incentive for the colleges to give you a lot of money because you're obligated to come to their school. Does that make sense, everyone? So what I tell my students, if you're going to do early decision, that means that's your number one school since you've been like in kindergarten, right? And your mom and dad are willing to potentially pay the full cost of college. And if that's the case, then do early decision because it does help you get into those schools. Okay. So this is the process we take our students through. I don't know why this is a little funky, but this is the process we take our students through. We start out with a dream process where we, kind of understand what you're looking for. What are your goals? What kind of colleges are you trying to get into? What are your dream schools? How can we build your college list? And then this right now is this what we're doing with our seniors is the essays, right? These the applications is, polishing things up to make sure your application is as good as possible before we submit. And then, of course, the bank, some of the things we were just talking about, finding those scholarships, finding colleges that will give you money. And then, of course, you want to know, this is kind of the unofficial day, which is May 1st. I don't know why this mouse keeps doing this, but May 1st is kind of the unofficial college decision day where you need to make a decision by, right? And so this is what we take our students through. And this is kind of our process, right? So you can see right now we're doing our essays. And then we're going to jump down to supplemental essays, and then we're going to start the Common App. And hopefully by the end of September, we're going to have at least 3 college applications done. That is my goal for my rising seniors. And then we continue working with our students all the way until they graduate, right? So what would success look like if you did start this process early, if you started this over the summer? You should have an organized college list. As I mentioned, that 8 to 15 range is kind of what I would suggest you do. You would have your first Common App essay draft done, maybe even your second or third draft, but at least your first draft done. Your personal statement complete. Have at least 1 or 2 supplemental essays started, if not done. So take your favorite college on your college list, your favorite 1 or 2, and just have everything done by September 30th. And if you can do that, if you can have your essay pretty much done, your supplemental essays done, your Common App done, your letters of recommendation, you're pretty much ready to go. And if you can have 1 or 2 done on the Common App, that means that 95% of all the work for all the other colleges on the Common App are done as well, because it's one application you can use for 1,000 colleges and universities. Does that make sense, everyone? So that's why we tell our students, start now, because if we can get a lot of this done by September 30th before senior year really gets really hard, well, you're going to enjoy your senior year so much better. So what are some things that you can walk away with tonight? I would say do one of these. Do one of these over the summer, if not all of them, but do at least one of these tonight. Create a Common App account. Yep, you can go ahead and create your Common App account. Don't fill out any college specific questions, but you can fill out the Common App basic information now. You don't have to wait. Now on August 1st, they do go in and wipe the class of 2025 out. They'll go in and take all the class of 2025 out of the Common App, and they'll upload some new data from some of these colleges. So that's why I say don't do any college specific questions, but you can go ahead and put in your name, your address, what high school you attend, things like that. And that's not going to be deleted on October 1st. So create your Common App account. Brainstorm your essay topic. Even write a first draft if you can, but at least start brainstorming this process. Build a draft of your college list if you haven't done this. And my advice is don't start with 2 or 3 colleges and work your way out. Start with, 4,500 colleges and work your way down. If you do it this way, you don't miss any great colleges and universities. So I live in the state of North Carolina. I think there's someone else here in North Carolina as well. But in the state of North Carolina, we have, just in this one state, we have over 126 colleges and universities. And if I ask a normal student, a typical student in the state of North Carolina, they could probably name about 12 colleges and universities. But if you think of 126 or so colleges in the state of North Carolina, then you add South Carolina and Virginia and Tennessee, you're talking hundreds and hundreds of colleges these students don't even know exist. And I bet you are very similar to that in your own home state. So start with, filter your way down. Don't build your list from 2 or 3 and work your way out, because if you do that, you're going to miss some great schools. Go ahead and calculate your student aid index. Get that number, know what that number is. That's going to really help you determine, are you going to qualify for need-based aid or non-need-based aid or merit-based aid? And schedule your college visits. At least do a virtual visit. At least do the virtual visit. What's the biggest mistake? Waiting, putting things off. Don't wait. The students who win are the ones who start now. Absolutely. And, a friend of mine made this graph, and I thought I'd share this with you. And I think this is really pertinent. What you see on the left-hand side is the list price of tuition per year, right? And so you have private schools up here. You have out-of-state public schools here, and you have in-state public schools here. So it goes from $0 to $80,000 a year. On the bottom, on the x-axis, we have rankings of U.S. News and World Report. So what's interesting is you have a college. Let's just pick a miscellaneous college here. Let's pick number 2. We have this college here, and we have this college here. We have this out-of-state college, and we have this, we have this private college here, and we have this, public out-of-state college here, and a private college here, right? They're ranked basically the same in U.S. News World Report. So if we consider U.S. News World Report as the end-all be-all, which it is not, but if we consider that ranking, you can see there's a huge price difference between this school and this school. Why would you go to this school if you can pay half the price to go to this school? Unless you're just mom and dad were alumni at the school and they're willing to pay the extra $20,000 a year, right? Same goes with number 1, right? This private school over here and this private school cost exactly the same. Why would you go to this school? If you can get into this school, why would you go to this school? If the price is the same, but the rankings are hugely different, go to the school with a higher ranking if you're going to pay the same price. Okay. And vice versa, same thing here, right? Between this private school and the out-of-state college, right? Again, you're paying more. Why pay more to go to this private school if you can get basically the same education? Okay. So another way to kind of put this, your reach private colleges have very similar tuitions to other private schools. And therefore, getting into a reach school or maybe a dream school is a much better return on your investment in most cases. And public colleges have a 38% lower tuition on average for out-of-state and 77% for in-state. So getting into your top choice public college in your state can be a far better return on your investment. So getting into that top choice public school in your state might be the best. And then earning scholarships at other top choice schools, like some of these private schools, can greatly, greatly reduce the tuition costs. So sometimes it is good to hire some professionals to help you with this to, again, get a great college education for a great price, right? So before we leave tonight, acting now matters. Remember that. Timely applications, admissions can be very complex. It takes time to do this right. And delays can mean missed opportunities. It can mean losing out on the application process. It can feel overwhelming as those deadline dates start to creep up on you. Next step, if you want, feel free to schedule a no-cost consultation with me. I'll show you in a second how you can do that. If you'd like, we'll spend about 25 minutes together. We can talk a little bit about your situation. But remember what Benjamin Franklin said, by failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. You need to prepare. This is what the summer is for. This is your superpower. Take advantage of it. Again, you can either go to my website or you can take a picture of this, the QR code, if you would like to schedule a free 25-minute consultation with me. I'm glad to talk it over with your situation. All right, that's all I had tonight, guys. I hope you came away with at least one nugget of information that you found useful. Any questions that you guys might have on anything, whether it be, senior related, sophomores, juniors, whatever it may be.
Thank you so much, Ryan. This is so, so helpful. Every year I learn even new information about college admission. So thank you for sharing all the really cool insights and data, especially. One thing I really appreciate about your work is that you are very much someone who relies on data and what's going on right now in the field to inform students and parents about what is the next right step. So I definitely recommend to students to reach out to you and work with you because you are very, very well informed. So
thank you. That's very nice of you to say that.
absolutely. I am someone who, as a researcher, I like to rely on data before making any assumptions or taking any decisions. So I really appreciate your approach. So yeah, everybody, we have about 5 or so minutes. Maybe we can take a little bit longer if folks have some time to stay on to tackle any large questions about the admission, points that Ryan shared or the financial aid or other things. But take your time. As I always tell my students when I'm teaching, you don't have to have the answer or the question right away. You are allowed to think about it for a minute or two. And then when you're ready, please share it in the chat and we'll try to answer as many of them as we can.
Absolutely. And again, if you leave here tonight and you think of it tomorrow, feel free to email me as well. I'll be glad to answer your questions that way as well.
Thank you, Ryan. This is really great. I know some folks are dropping just because I know it's time. They probably have to go other places, but I know some folks are staying. So let's try to tackle the questions that are coming through. Ellen said, could you review the points you made about in-state public versus out-of-state public versus private schools and the ROI?
Yeah, great question. So I'll share my screen and maybe we'll go back a little bit to kind of review that data that we were looking at. And by the way, I got my undergraduate degree in engineering. So that's why I use data a lot. I'm just kind of a numbers nerd when it comes to things like this. So again, I try to use data to help make good decisions. And when it comes to college, again, I think you got to use your heart and your calculator to make these decisions. And so this graph basically is showing you the cost is the y-axis, right? The cost per year. And this is the sticker price is what I like to say. And on the x-axis, this is the rankings, right? And so again, I'm not a huge proponent of using rankings, but a lot of parents, a lot of students like to use rankings. So if we're using rankings as a way to kind of relate colleges, let's look at, this college number 2, right? So this line, this kind of a grayish, I think this is gray, at least it's on my computer, it's gray. This is your private tuition for a private college, right? And you can see we have private colleges here from about $60,000 all the way to probably, I don't know, mid-60s, okay? And on this line, there are different data points of different colleges that are ranked on US News World Report. So we have colleges way up here, these are probably your Harvards and your Yales and Princetons and so on and so forth. And then we have other private schools down here. And the point is on this graph is if the price is the same, if you're going to pay, for example, number 1, if this college, this private school cost about the same price, right? Because this is the price over here, your x-axis, as this school, and these colleges are ranked differently. This college is ranked top 10, and this college is in the top 50 percentile. Why not go to this school if it's exactly the same price, right? You'll probably get a better return on your investment. Now, when it comes to state schools, for example, let's take this college right here. So you can see it's a really, really nice school. It's a state school. It might be Chapel Hill. It might be Michigan. It might be Virginia, right? It could be any of these state schools. And you can see it's ranked the same as these colleges, these prestigious private schools. And if you live in the state, let's just use Chapel Hill, for example, since I live in North Carolina, let's just say this is Chapel Hill. If my students can get into Chapel Hill, they're going to pay in-state tuition versus paying potentially a really expensive private school for basically the same education based upon the rankings. So hopefully that made sense, right? This is, again, this isn't necessarily what you pay, but it just kind of gives you an idea of making sure you're getting a good return on your investment. And one of the tools I use with my students is that we have a tool that can show you, based upon the college you attend and based upon your major, on average, what you would make first year out of school, 5 years out of school, and 10 years out of school. So let's say you're a business major and you go to college X, and it's an in-state state school, or you could go to an out-of-state private school and it costs twice as much. And you look at the data and you're going to make the same amount of money. Why would you pay twice as much to go to an out-of-state state school versus an in-state state school if you're going to make the same amount of money, other than just using the name or prestige or trying to impress your friends potentially, right? So you want to use data to help you make those decisions. So hopefully that makes sense.
This is very helpful. I am learning so much. I have an 18-month-old baby, and I'm already thinking about ways to prepare for this, on how to think about it 17 years from now. This is very, very helpful. I think,
great.
Yeah, I love it. Data nerd here too. Sunil is asking if you could share the cost of your services, but I would recommend that Sunil just reaches out to you privately to have the conversation. I guess one question that I have for you, specifically for the students who are here today, they might have done research with us or are doing research with Lumiere this summer. What would be some of your big picture advice for how they can approach this experience as young scholars doing research with PhD candidates or postdocs? Are there some things that they should be thinking about at the same time as doing this program?
Yeah, that's a great question. And obviously colleges and universities love research. They love seeing that because you're probably going to be doing this in college. And so you're just showing these colleges you already have the skill set. You're not having to relearn this in college. So it makes the colleges feel a little bit easier to say, hey, yeah, you're qualified academically to come to our school when you can showcase that. So if you can do this, I would certainly encourage you to do it. And just again, if you want to, you might could use this as an essay topic for your Common App, or even a college specific essay. So you just kind of keep copious notes and think about the process that you're doing and how you work through this process and the communications that you had with your professor or whoever you're working with, and what are some of the challenges that you had faced and how you overcame those challenges. Those are all good things to think about and make note of, because if you are a sophomore or a junior, you can use that data potentially for an essay next year, even a scholarship essay.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ryan. I know Sunil wants to connect, and I'm sure other folks do. Do you mind just popping that slide where you can grab your information specifically?
Absolutely. Let me do that real quick, because I know everyone's ready to get out of here tonight.
And I will also follow up with everybody tomorrow morning with a recording of this conversation, as well as Ryan's email and his website. And you guys can reach out to him for the no-cost consultation, which I think is very, very generous of you to offer, Ryan. But yeah, if there is one last remaining question, happy to take it. But if not, then I will wish all of you a very happy summer, very fruitful summer. Hopefully you can get a lot done given the conversation we had tonight. And hopefully you can connect with Ryan so that you can strategize accordingly and plan smartly.
Absolutely. Yeah, you guys have a great summer.
Thank you so much, Ryan. And thank you all for coming tonight. We really appreciate you attending.
Thanks, guys, for coming. Have a good night.